She was born into poverty, but in her early years, life was not cruel. Their small house stood at the edge of a dusty village road, with cracked walls and a leaking roof, yet it was filled with warmth. Her mother worked hard every day, stitching clothes for neighbors, while her father labored wherever he could find work. Food was simple, sometimes scarce, but love was never missing. The girl grew up believing that as long as her parents were beside her, nothing else mattered. Her mother was her world. She brushed her hair every morning, told her stories at night, and whispered promises that life would one day be better. But sickness does not care about promises. One winter, her mother fell ill. First, it seemed like nothing serious, just weakness and fever. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Medicines were expensive, and the family could not afford proper treatment. One quiet night, while the girl slept beside her, her mother took her last breath. The house changed after that night. The laughter disappeared. The warmth faded. Her father tried his best, but grief weighed heavily on him. He struggled to manage work and raise a child alone. The villagers began advising him to remarry, saying a child needed a woman in the house. After much hesitation, he agreed, hoping it would bring stability back into their lives. The new woman arrived with a forced smile and sharp eyes. At first, she pretended to be kind. She spoke softly in front of neighbors and treated the girl well when others were watching. The father believed he had made the right choice. But slowly, once the doors closed and no one was around, the truth surfaced. The girl was no longer called by loving words. She was ordered around like a servant. Small mistakes were punished with harsh words. Food portions grew smaller for her, while the stepmother made sure her own plate was full. If the father asked, she smiled and said the child was just picky or weak. The father, tired and unaware, believed her. School became another battlefield. The girl loved learning, but the stepmother often refused to give her notebooks or shoes. She was sent to school hungry, wearing old, torn clothes. When teachers complained, the stepmother blamed the child for being careless. At home, the girl studied quietly, hiding her books as if they were treasures that could be taken away at any moment. The father noticed the change in his daughter, but he was growing weaker himself. Long years of labor had damaged his health. One evening, after returning from work, he collapsed. There was no money for hospitals, no relatives willing to help. Within days, he too was gone. The girl stood beside his lifeless body, unable to cry, as if her tears had already dried. Now she was truly alone. With the father gone, the stepmother dropped all pretense. She openly called the girl a curse. She blamed her for every problem, every shortage, every hardship. The girl was forced to wake before sunrise, fetch water, clean houses, and work nonstop. Any rest was considered laziness. Hunger became her constant companion. Neighbors noticed bruises on her arms and fear in her eyes, but poverty makes people look away. Everyone had their own struggles. No one wanted trouble. One night the girl fell sick. Fever burned through her body, and her legs shook when she tried to stand. She could not complete her chores. The stepmother exploded in anger, shouting that the girl was useless and a burden. She accused her of pretending to be ill to avoid work. That night, the girl lay shivering on the floor, listening to rain hit the roof, wondering if anyone in the world still cared about her. The next morning, the stepmother made a decision that would change everything. She told the girl they were going on a short trip. Weak and confused, the girl followed her. They walked far beyond the village, past fields and broken paths. The sky darkened and the wind grew cold. When they reached an empty area near an old road, the stepmother stopped. She told the girl to sit and wait. She said she would return with food and medicine. The girl believed her. She always believed, because believing was the only hope she had. Minutes passed, then hours. The rain began again. Stepmother never came back. The girl tried to stand, but her legs gave way. Mud soaked her clothes. Cold crept into her bones. She called out softly at first, then louder, until her voice broke. No one answered. Cars passed far away, but none stopped. Darkness wrapped around her and fear settled deep inside, she thought. Of her mother's voice, her father's tired smile, and the small house that once felt like home, she wondered if this was how her story ended, alone and forgotten. As the night grew colder, her strength faded. She lay still, staring at the sky, unsure if she would see another sunrise. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark refused to die. It whispered that she must hold on, even when everything told her to give up. That night, fate watched silently, preparing to step in where cruelty had ruled. And though the girl did not know it yet, her journey had only just begun. The morning arrived cold and gray. The girl woke shivering, her small body stiffed from the night spent on the wet ground. Her clothes clung to her skin, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Her voice had been swallowed by the darkness around her. She slowly tried to stand, each step a struggle, and began walking along the dirt road, hoping to find someone, anyone, who would help her. The village was far behind her, and the path was unfamiliar. Fields stretched endlessly on either side, broken only by a few scattered trees. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke from distant homes, but no friendly faces appeared. Hours passed, and the girl grew weaker with every step. Hunger and fever mixed together, making her head spin. She leaned against a tree, wishing for the warmth of a home she would never see again. Just as she began to feel she could walk no further, a sound reached her ears, a low, hesitant voice calling out. She turned slowly, too weak to speak. A middle-aged man appeared, carrying a small bundle of clothes. His eyes were kind, and he wore a gentle smile. He was a poor farmer from a nearby town, traveling to the fields. When he saw her, he immediately realized something was wrong. He knelt beside her and asked if she was okay. The girl could barely nod. The words caught in her throat. The man didn't. He simply wrapped his coat around her and guided her toward his cart. He offered her water and some dry bread, insisting she'd eat before moving. Her hands trembled as she took the food, but the warmth of kindness brought tears to her eyes. For the first time in days, she felt a small spark of hope. The farmer took her to his home, a small, simple house with a thatched roof. Inside, the smell of cooking filled the air. The girl had never seen such a place, clean and safe, though very modest. She was given a blanket and a corner to rest. The farmer's wife treated her gently, washing her face and hands and speaking softly to her. That night, for the first time since being abandoned, she slept without fear. Days turned into weeks. The girl slowly regained strength under the care of the kind couple. They gave her small jobs around the house, fetching water, sweeping the floor, helping in the kitchen, but never scolded or punished her. They treated her as family, though she had none left. Despite their poverty, they shared everything they had. And through their care, the girl learned that kindness still existed in the world. But the outside world was not always gentle. She still needed to go to the town school, and that meant facing poverty in front of others. Her clothes were worn, her shoes tattered. Children laughed at her, teachers frowned at her lack of supplies. Every day was a battle. Yet the girl refused to stay silent. She borrowed books whenever she could and studied with determination. Each lesson was a small victory. She clung to the hope that education might be her ticket out of suffering. Life taught her harsh lessons quickly. She discovered that people would often judge her by her appearance, ignoring the person inside. But she also discovered resilience within herself. She worked harder, stayed later at night to read, and asked questions whenever she could. Slowly, her intelligence and diligence became impossible to ignore. A few teachers noticed her effort and encouraged her. They became her allies, small lights in an otherwise harsh world. Even with progress, fear never fully left her. She remembered the stepmother's cruel face, the cold night when she was left to die. The memory haunted her dreams. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night, trembling, and wonder if the stepmother would return to hurt her again. The farmer and his wife reassured her, but she knew deep down that her life had been changed forever. Trust was fragile, and she learned to guard her heart while still allowing small hope to grow as she grew older.
Ow.
Work and school became more demanding. She took odd jobs to help the kind farmer and his wife, earning small amounts of money. She learned to cook, clean, and sew not just for survival, but as skills that could one day support her independence. Despite exhaustion, she refused to give in to despair. Each challenge she faced only strengthened her determination. She wanted to rise, not just survive. One day she overheard a conversation between the farmer and his wife. They spoke of their own struggles and the poverty they had endured. The girl realized that she was not alone in hardship. Many people suffered silently. This thought changed her perspective. She began noticing the quiet strength in others, learning from them, and finding inspiration in their resilience. The world was harsh, yes, but it was also full of courage if one knew where to look. By the time she reached her teenage years, she had learned to navigate life with caution and wisdom. Her small body had grown strong from labor, her mind sharp from learning, her heart, though scarred, open enough to care for others. She became known in the town as the girl who never complained, who worked tirelessly, and who always had a kind word for those worse off than herself. Her story slowly began to change. People started noticing her determination and honesty. A small shopkeeper offered her part-time work, paying her modest wages. A teacher lent her books to study at home. Each small act of support was a reminder that the world had not entirely abandoned her. The girl learned to accept help without shame. Understanding that asking for assistance did not make her weak, it made her human. Despite her growing independence, she never forgot the night she was left to die. That memory fueled a silent promise. She would rise above poverty and cruelty, not just for herself, but for every child who felt abandoned and forgotten. Every chore she completed, every lesson she learned, every challenge she overcame was a step toward fulfilling that promise. Then, one morning, she received news that would change the course of her life. A distant relative, unknown to her until that moment, had passed away, leaving a small sum of money in trust for the girl. It was not much, but it was enough to consider furthering her education in the town. For the first time, the idea of a future beyond survival took root in her mind. She allowed herself a small smile, the first real smile in years. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but she now had a reason to hope. Her determination became a guiding force. She studied harder, worked longer hours, and planned carefully. Each day was a battle, but she faced it with courage. She understood now that life would always present challenges, but it was her response to them that would define her future. The girl, once left to die, had found a reason to live. She had discovered that even in the darkest nights, small acts of kindness could spark hope and set the path toward survival, and maybe, one day, toward greatness. By the time she entered her teenage years, the girl had transformed from a fragile, abandoned child into a determined young woman. Her body had grown stronger through hard labor, and her mind sharper through relentless study. Yet, the memories of her stepmother's cruelty never left her. They were etched into her soul, reminding her that the world could be cruel. But they also fueled an unwavering desire to rise above her circumstances. Every morning she woke early, not just to complete chores or attend school, but to prepare herself for the challenges that lay ahead. She had learned to observe people, to understand their intentions, and to act with caution. Trust was something she now gave sparingly, but when given, it was full and sincere. The farmer and his wife remained her anchors, supporting her when life became too heavy, celebrating her small victories, and teaching her lessons that money could never buy. She began exploring opportunities beyond the town. Every spare moment was spent learning new skills, reading books she borrowed from the small library, and practicing tasks that could one day help her earn a living. Sewing, cooking, cleaning, managing small sums of money, these were not merely chores anymore. They were tools for survival and independence. She realized that her hands, which once trembled in fear, could now create and sustain life. School was another battlefield. Teachers had started noticing her determination. While some students mocked her old, worn-out clothes, a few became quietly inspired by her relentless effort. She refused to let ridicule stop her. She studied late into the night, often by candlelight, absorbing every lesson. Math, reading, and writing became her weapons, allowing her to fight against the poverty and cruelty that had dominated her early years. She realized that knowledge was power, and she was determined to wield it. Yet life remained unpredictable. One day, the small sum of money she had inherited from the distant relative was threatened by unscrupulous neighbors. They tried to claim it for themselves, arguing that a girl with no family had no right to it. The girl, though frightened, faced them with a courage she had been building for years. She spoke calmly, showing determination and intelligence beyond her years. Her stance astonished the adults, and the money remained hers. That day, she learned an important lesson. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Encouraged by small victories, she began dreaming bigger. The girl understood that survival was no longer enough. She wanted to change her destiny. She thought of opening a small business or working in a larger town to earn more. Every plan was carefully thought out, every step measured. She saved every penny she could, often going hungry to put aside money for her education and future. Her resilience became her identity. She started gaining recognition for her hard work and honesty. Friends and mentors emerged along the way. A teacher offered guidance, teaching her about entrepreneurship and the importance of networking. A neighbor, impressed by her dedication, provided temporary work in a small shop where she learned how to manage customers, handle money, and organize goods. These experiences, small as they seemed, laid the foundation for her understanding of the world beyond poverty. Despite progress, emotional scars remained. She would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, haunted by the memory of the stepmother's cruelty. She thought about the countless nights she had spent alone, cold and hungry, abandoned in the dark. These thoughts, instead of breaking her, fueled her determination. She vowed that she would never allow herself to be powerless again. She wanted not only security but independence and influence, a way to ensure that no one could ever treat her as she had once been treated. Her teenage years were marked by relentless effort. Every challenge she faced became a stepping stone. If a job required long hours, she endured them. If a lesson seemed difficult, she studied it until she mastered it. Her body became strong, her mind sharp, and her heart resilient. Slowly, she began to understand that the same hardships that had once crushed her could now be used to build her character, to shape her future. One afternoon, while helping at the shop, she met a young entrepreneur visiting the town. Observing her work ethic and intelligence, he offered advice on running a small business and encouraged her to think bigger. Though shy at first, she listened attentively, asking questions and absorbing every word. This encounter planted a seed in her mind, the possibility that she could rise beyond the town, beyond survival, into a life of opportunities and success. Motivation became a daily companion. She made a routine that balanced work, study, and self-improvement. She learned to wake before sunrise, organize her tasks, and focus on long-term goals rather than immediate satisfaction. Every evening, she reflected on the day's achievements, no matter how small, and planned for tomorrow. Gradually, the habits she cultivated formed the foundation for discipline and resilience that would serve her. For the rest of her life, the girl's story began to inspire others in the town. People spoke of the young woman who faced poverty and abandonment, yet refused to give up. They marveled at her determination, her intelligence, and her unwavering spirit. Yet, she remained humble, never forgetting the kindness that had saved her and the pain that had shaped her. She understood that pride without humility was empty, and success without empathy was meaningless. She began to dream of helping others who were suffering, just as she had once suffered. Though her own life was still fragile and uncertain, she wanted to create a life that could offer hope to others. This thought guided her actions, shaping not only her ambitions, but also her character. She learned that resilience was not only about personal survival, but also about lifting others, when it's possible. The transition from a frightened, abandoned child to a determined, resourceful teenager was not simple or quick. Every step was accompanied by fear, doubt, and exhaustion. But she had learned to see obstacles as lessons and hardships as teachers. The girl began to realize that, while she could not change the cruelty of her past, she could control how she responded to it. And in that control lay her power. As the years progressed, she started making small plans for the future. She wanted to move to the town permanently, continue her education, and eventually create opportunities for herself that poverty had once denied. Each day was a careful mix of labor, learning, and preparation. The girl understood that success would not come overnight, but she had the patience and determination to see her plans through. By the time she reached late adolescence, she was ready to take her first bold steps into independence. With the support of the farmer and his wife, a small savings fund, and the skills she had acquired over years of struggle, she began seeking opportunities beyond the town. Her heart, though scarred, carried courage. Her mind, once clouded by fear, was sharp and strategic, and her spirit, once fragile, burned with a quiet yet unyielding fire. The girl who had been abandoned, left to die by her stepmother, had transformed her pain into purpose. She had discovered strength in adversity, hope in despair, and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. And though she still had a long journey ahead, the foundation was set. Every lesson learned, every hardship endured, and every act of resilience was preparing her for the life she would one day build, a life not just of survival, but of influence, success, and the ability to change her own destiny. By the time she reached adulthood, the girl's life had changed in ways she could have never imagined. Her teenage years of labor, study, and perseverance had given her more than just survival skills. They had given her confidence, clarity, and an unshakable belief in herself. She now carried the quiet strength of someone who had faced despair and refused to be broken. The lessons from her past shaped her, guiding every decision she made and every risk she chose to take. The small town had become familiar, yet she longed for more. The farmer and his wife, who had raised her with kindness and care, understood that she needed to move beyond their humble home if she was to achieve her dreams. With their blessing and a small fund she had saved over the years, she began to explore opportunities in the larger towns nearby. Her first step was finding a stable job that could support her while allowing her to continue learning and growing. She found work at a small trading company, initially performing menial tasks like cleaning, organizing supplies, and running errands. But she approached every task with dedication, ensuring that even the smallest duties were done perfectly. Her diligence did not go unnoticed. Supervisors began assigning her responsibilities that required more skill and intelligence. Slowly, she started learning the intricacies of business, from handling accounts to negotiating small deals. Each lesson she absorbed was a building block toward the future she envisioned. While work demanded her time and energy, she did not neglect her education. She attended night classes and workshops, often studying late into the night by candlelight or a small lamp. Her peers were often surprised by her determination, especially given the hardships she had endured. Yet she remained humble, focusing not on recognition but on acquiring knowledge that could help her climb higher and secure a better life. It was during this period that she discovered her knack for identifying opportunities others overlooked. She noticed small gaps in the market, areas where products were in demand but not adequately supplied. She began experimenting cautiously, investing tiny amounts of her savings into these ventures. The first attempts were modest, yielding small profits. They taught her invaluable lessons about risk, timing, and decision-making. Every challenge she faced reinforced her resilience. There were days when sales were low, when customers were rude, or when she felt overwhelmed by exhaustion. But she never gave up. She reminded herself of the nights she had spent abandoned, of the hunger and fear that once dominated her life. Every struggle in the present seemed smaller in comparison. Now she used it as motivation to push further. As months turned into years, her ventures slowly expanded. She began hiring a few trustworthy people to help with the work, creating a small team that shared her vision. Her reputation for honesty, diligence, and intelligence spread, attracting more clients and partnerships. For the first time, she felt a sense of control over her life, a freedom she had never known as a child. Money was no longer a distant dream, it was becoming a reality. Her success, however, was never just about wealth. She remembered the kindness of the farmer and his wife, and the strangers who had once helped her when she was alone and weak. She began to see her success as a responsibility, an opportunity to give back. She started mentoring younger workers, teaching them skills and helping them find opportunities. She wanted others to experience the same chance at growth and dignity that she had received. Despite her growing success, she remained vigilant. The memory of her stepmother's cruelty was never far from her mind. She had learned to anticipate deceit and to protect herself from those who might take advantage of her. This caution served her well, allowing her to make strategic decisions and avoid potential pitfalls. Her past had been harsh, but it had taught her lessons that could never be learned in comfort. Soon, her small ventures evolved into larger projects. She invested in more significant opportunities, sometimes taking calculated risks that others feared. Her careful planning and relentless effort paid off, and the profits began to multiply. What had once been a modest sum in savings grew into a substantial fund that allowed her to dream even bigger. She began thinking about long-term investments, property, and larger-scale enterprises. Each step forward was a testament to her intelligence, courage, and unyielding determination. Friends and mentors continued to play an essential role. She sought advice from experienced business people and studied successful enterprises. She adapted their lessons to her circumstances, blending knowledge with intuition and practical experience. Her ability to learn quickly and apply lessons effectively became one of her greatest strengths. The girl who had once been abandoned was now shaping her destiny with precision and confidence. As her wealth grew, so did her influence. She began participating in local initiatives, helping improve the lives of people in her community. Schools, health programs, and small businesses benefited from her guidance and support. Her success was no longer just personal, it was becoming a force for good. She understood that true achievement was measured not by the money she earned, but by the positive impact she could make on the lives of others. Yet, despite all her accomplishments, she never lost sight of her origins. The nights spent cold and hungry, the fear of abandonment, the longing for kindness, they all remained a part of her story. They were reminders of where she had come from and what she had overcome. These memories fueled her compassion and humility, ensuring that her success never led to arrogance or disregard for those who were struggling by now. She had transformed completely. The girl who had been left to die by her stepmother had risen to become a respected and capable woman. Her ventures continued to expand, her knowledge deepened, and her influence grew. Every decision she made reflected the careful thought, resilience, and courage that had been forged through years of hardship. She had learned that life's cruelty could be converted into strength, and that determination, patience, and kindness could shape a future once thought impossible. Her story was far from over. While she had achieved a level of success that many could only dream of, she still carried aspirations that reached even higher. The foundation she had built was strong, and with each passing day, she prepared herself for the next challenge, the next opportunity. She understood that the journey of growth and success was ongoing, and she embraced it with energy and purpose, through every triumph and every setback. She remained focused on the bigger picture, building a life that reflected her resilience, intelligence, and compassion. The child abandoned and left to die had become a woman who controlled her destiny, touched the lives of others, and proved that no circumstance, no cruelty, no poverty could ever define the limits of her potential. Each step she took forward was a victory, a promise kept to herself, and a testament to the power of perseverance, vision, and the human spirit. Years had passed since the girl who had once been left to die wandered alone in the rain. She had transformed her life in ways that even she could scarcely imagine. Her ventures had grown into a thriving enterprise, earning her wealth, respect, and influence. But even with all she had accomplished, the shadows of her past lingered. The memories of hunger, fear, and abandonment never truly faded. They were part of her, reminders of the journey that had shaped her into the woman she had become. One morning, she received unexpected news. A letter arrived, worn and slightly torn, carried by a local courier. It was from someone she had long forgotten, her stepmother. The words on the page were simple, but heavy with need. Illness and poverty had driven her to write, pleading for help. The woman who had once left her to die was now reaching out, desperate and alone. For a long moment she could not read further. Her hands trembled, and her mind raced with conflicting emotions. Anger surged first, a burning memory of years of cruelty, neglect, and pain. But then, beneath the anger, there was something else, a quiet voice reminding her of the kindness she had once received from strangers, the warmth she had known in the home of the farmer and his wife. She realized that she had a choice to make, to answer with revenge or with compassion. The decision was not easy. Memories of cold nights, hunger, and loneliness flashed through her mind. She could see herself as a child, small and defenseless, abandoned in the mud with no one to protect her. She could have chosen anger, refusing any contact and allowing bitterness to guide her. But as she reflected, she understood something profound. Anger could consume her, but forgiveness could free her. The power she now held gave her the ability to choose the path that aligned with her values, after careful thought, but she did so on her terms. She ensured that the stepmother received medical care and shelter, not as a reward for past cruelty, but because she refused to let pain dictate her life anymore. The act was not easy. Old wounds ached, and trust did not return overnight. Yet she maintained composure, using her wisdom and patience to navigate this delicate reunion. The stepmother, humbled by her circumstances and the unexpected kindness, began to understand the consequences of her actions. She apologized sincerely, though words alone could never erase years of neglect. The girl listened, accepting the apology without forgetting the past. This act of forgiveness was liberating, a symbolic release of the chains that had bound her heart for so long. It was a moment of personal triumph, testament to the strength she had cultivated through hardship, with the stepmother now receiving care. She turned her attention to broader goals. Her business ventures expanded further, moving into larger markets and creating employment for dozens of people. Every decision she made reflected the lessons she had learned: diligence, honesty, patience, and resilience. She remained humble despite her growing wealth, remembering the people and experiences that had shaped her. Her story became known in the community and beyond. People admired her not only for her financial success, but for her character. She had achieved more than most could imagine, yet she remained approachable, empathetic, and grounded. Her journey inspired many, showing that even the most difficult beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes. When guided by perseverance and morality beyond business, she invested in programs to help disadvantaged children. Schools, scholarships, and community centers benefited from her resources. She wanted to ensure that no child would feel the hopelessness she had once known. Every effort to help others was a way to honor the struggles she had endured and the kindness she had received along the way. Despite all the wealth and influence, she never lost sight of her personal growth. Each morning began with reflection, each decision weighed with care. She understood that true power was not in money or status, but in the ability to make choices that reflected one's values. Her life was no longer dictated by fear, cruelty, or scarcity. It was guided by purpose, compassion, and strategic thinking. Over time, she became a symbol of triumph over adversity. Her story was shared in communities, schools, and local gatherings. Children listened in awe, learning that circumstances did not define their potential. Adults admired her wisdom, learning that kindness and strength could coexist even in the face of betrayal and hardship. Her life became a living lesson, showing that resilience, courage, and empathy were the true measures of success. Even as she grew older, she never stopped seeking growth. She explored new ventures, learned new skills, and continued to challenge herself. Every achievement reminded her of how far she had come from a child abandoned in the rain to a woman, capable of transforming lives, including her own. The hardships she had endured became the foundation of her strength. Guiding her every step, in private moments, she would reflect on the journey. She remembered the fear, the hunger, the pain, and the loneliness. And then she would remember the first stranger who had shown her kindness, the farmer and his wife who had nurtured her, the teachers and mentors who had guided her. She realized that life was a balance of suffering and support, despair and hope, cruelty and kindness. It was this understanding that shaped the woman she had become. As the years passed, She ensured that the stepmother lived with dignity, not as a prisoner of her past actions, but as a person deserving of care in her old age. The act of compassion healed something within her as well. Forgiveness became a source of strength, demonstrating that one's past did not have to dictate the future. She had the power to create her own story, and she had done so with courage, wisdom, and heart. Her empire continued to grow, both in financial terms and in the impact she made on people's lives. But more importantly, she had achieved inner peace. The girl who had once been left to die had risen to heights unimaginable, not just in wealth but in integrity, empathy, and human connection. She had learned that success was not measured by what one accumulates, but by how one uplifts others and remains true to oneself. In the end, her life was a testament to the power of resilience, determination, and kindness. She had faced the worst the world could offer and had turned it into the best she could achieve. The child abandoned and left to die had become a woman who commanded respect, transformed lives, and embodied the principles she had lived by from the moment she chose to survive: courage, hope, and unwavering humanity. Her story was complete, not just as a tale of wealth, but as a journey of triumph over cruelty, the realization of potential, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Though she had reached remarkable heights, the woman never stopped seeking personal growth and meaningful connections. Life had taught her that success was not only about wealth or status, but also about inner peace, fulfillment, and the ability to touch the lives of others. She now understood that every challenge she had faced from her stepmother's cruelty to nights spent hungry and abandoned had shaped her into someone capable of handling life with grace, intelligence, and compassion. In her daily routine, she balanced running her thriving enterprises with mentoring and supporting others. She made it a point to spend time with young people who were struggling, just as she once had, offering guidance, advice, and hope. She created programs that trained underprivileged children in skills that could help them secure a future. Scholarships, workshops, and mentorship programs became an integral part of her mission. She wanted every child who had felt helpless or abandoned to know that their circumstances did not define their future. Her life also involved deep reflection. She often spent quiet evenings thinking about the people who had played pivotal roles in her journey: the farmer and his wife who had saved her, the mentors who had guided her, and even the strangers whose small acts of kindness had given her hope. These reflections reminded her that no person achieves greatness alone, and that gratitude and humility were as important as ambition and perseverance. Despite the impressive growth of her business empire, she remained intimately involved in the daily operations, understanding that leadership required not only strategy, but also personal attention. She maintained an approachable demeanor, listening to employees' concerns, solving problems firsthand, and ensuring fairness in every decision. Her actions inspired loyalty and respect. The culture she created emphasized integrity, kindness, and dedication. Life, however, was never without challenges. Even as she gained wealth and influence, she encountered people who tried to deceive or manipulate her. Business rivals questioned her intentions. Competitors attempted to sabotage projects, and some individuals sought personal gain at the expense of others. Yet she had learned from her past that careful observation, patience, and strategic thinking were essential. She faced each challenge calmly, assessing every situation and making choices that aligned with her values. Her past, once a source of pain, now became a source of strength. The memories of her stepmother's cruelty, of nights spent alone and hungry, served as a reminder of the resilience she had developed. Each obstacle in the present seemed manageable when compared to the trials she had endured. These experiences provided her with an inner strength that allowed her to navigate complex situations with wisdom and composure. One day, she visited a new town to oversee the opening of a community center she had funded. As she walked through the streets, she encountered a young girl sitting alone, clearly lost and afraid. The sight was painfully familiar. She approached the girl gently, offering comfort, guidance, and a warm smile. The girl hesitated at first, unsure whether to trust this stranger, but eventually she accepted the kindness. That encounter was a vivid reminder that her journey was ongoing, not just in terms of business success, but in continuing to make a difference in the lives of those who needed help. Over the years, she became a role model for many. Stories of her rise from abandonment to wealth and influence were shared widely. People admired her not only for her financial achievements, but for her resilience, intelligence, and humanity. She used her platform to speak about the importance of perseverance, education, kindness, and strategic thinking. Her message was clear. Circumstances might shape one's beginning. Determination, courage, and empathy could shape one's destiny. Her stepmother, once the source of her deepest pain, had become a living reminder of the power of forgiveness. Their relationship was still cautious, but she ensured that the woman lived with dignity and care. The act of forgiveness, she realized, had freed her from the emotional chains of the past. She no longer carried bitterness, allowing her to focus fully on building a future filled with purpose and compassion. As her influence grew, she began collaborating with organizations to provide broader support to those in need. Initiatives were launched to improve education, healthcare, and living conditions for children and families facing poverty. Her insight gained through personal experience allowed her to identify areas of real need and design programs that had tangible impact. She remained actively involved, often visiting projects personally to understand the challenges and successes firsthand. Despite her busy life, she also cultivated personal relationships, surrounding herself with people who shared her values. Friends, advisors, and colleagues formed a support network that balanced professional guidance with emotional encouragement. She understood that trust and loyalty were earned and maintained through consistent actions and integrity. Every relationship she nurtured reflected her belief in kindness, respect, and mutual growth. Her personal growth was as significant as her professional achievements. She practiced mindfulness, reflection, and gratitude regularly, understanding that mental and emotional well-being were essential to sustaining success. She encouraged those around her to adopt similar practices, believing that personal strength was inseparable from professional excellence. Her life was now a balance of ambition and compassion, success and humility, leadership and service. Years of experience allowed her to anticipate and handle crises with wisdom. Business challenges, personal dilemmas, and unexpected obstacles were no longer overwhelming. She had learned that patience, careful assessment, and strategic planning were more effective than impulsive reactions. This approach not only stabilized her enterprises, but also set an example for those she mentored, demonstrating that resilience and intelligence were essential to navigating life successfully. Through it all, she never forgot the importance of small acts of kindness. A word of encouragement, a helping hand, a moment of listening. These gestures were as powerful as major initiatives. She recognized that lasting change often began with simple human actions, and she made it a point to embody this philosophy daily. Her journey, from a girl abandoned in the mud to a woman of wealth, influence, and empathy, had reached a point of fulfillment. Yet she remained forward-looking, understanding that life was a continuous journey of growth, learning, and contribution. She knew that challenges would always arise, but she had the inner strength, wisdom, and compassion to meet them. She was no longer defined by her past, but she honored it by using her experiences to guide and uplift others. The woman had become a living testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and purposeful action. Her life illustrated that true success was measured not only by personal achievement, but by the positive impact one could have on the world. Every child she helped, every life she touched, and every act of integrity she demonstrated added to the legacy. She was building a legacy of hope, strength, and humanity. In quiet moments, she would reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the fear, loneliness, and despair of her early years, and she smiled at how far she had come. The girl who had been left to die had transformed into a woman who embodied courage, wisdom, and compassion. Her story was no longer just about survival or wealth. It was about the power of the human spirit, the ability to rise above adversity, and the enduring impact of kindness and resilience.